Recording in progress, everybody's favorite phrase because we are live. Yes, we're still alive. We have survived the storms. We are both in the Tennessee tornado alley. Trying to think of something that tornado alley. I was trying to get like another T, but throughway, I guess we'll say.
Tunnel.
We have survived, even though we are a lot wetter than we used to be. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We're going to find out. So we'll have to add some dry humor to like figure this out. Anyways, so it has been a week. It's been a while. Let's talk about what do we want to talk about today. I think you had some ideas, so you want to throw a couple
Yeah.
out?
So yesterday I was over at Union University. They were doing some hackathon thing for I think it was the energy department. Jackson Energy was doing a hackathon with some of the students there. And they invited local small business to come in and they were pitching their ideas. And it's interesting to hear a perspective from a student trying to like brainstorm this, like these big business ideas, how to make it work using fiber. And one of the things I struggled with talking to the students, and this might be something good for our discussion, is uh, how big or lofty should your initial idea for your business be? Because some of these guys have really great ideas, but they were so lofty. It's like, oh, you probably need to peel off one of those pieces, focus on that first, and then grow into the other sectors. Or you might be overwhelmed. You might run out of money. You might run out of time. It's one of those. It's like, how ambitious should you be out of the gate? You know what I mean?
That's
And it was hard telling them no on some of that, or it could, because their deadline, basically, they had to come up with this big idea, and like, how do they sell it? How do they pitch it? And it's like, well, I don't want to get into too much, but one of them encompassed like government regulations and securities. Well, that's a whole boatload of topics. And how are you going to handle and tackle all of that to kind of be like the central go-to place for that?
It's a really interesting idea because of it gets into it does get into like how do you because you can't bootstrap some of those. I mean, maybe you can, but like if you want to, yeah, this is something I don't know we've ever actually touched on this. We've talked about people that say, "Hey, I want to build eBay on, a $500 budget," or "I want an Amazon, it's Amazon but not Amazon $1,000 budget." Stuff like that. It's like, look, they've been doing this for years and spent trillions of dollars effectively. So, no, your budget is totally off. But I don't think we've ever talked about, and part of it's because it's not something, this does get a little bit out of our wheelhouse. So just to be honest, everybody there in the Yahoo world, or the Yahoo world, the YouTube world, I'm sorry. I just moved decades right there. I was warping time and space. Is when it does get a little into like, well, how do you do that? Because you can't bootstrap it. So how do you try to match your business vision and your plan against things like, okay, what if we go out and we get a loan, or we find venture capital, or we go through funding rounds and stuff like that? Or do we go, pitch it to investors, and what does that look like? And some of those things that we really haven't talked about. And I think it's more because now we're talking, which is, I think it's a cool thing to discuss, because now we're really talking business. We're not talking side hustle at this point. We're talking,
Right.
all right, now, what if you want to make a business? Because you're not going to side hustle. Nobody's going to give you $10 million seed round and say, oh yeah, you're side hustling and you can give us whatever you give us after your day job. Like, no, you better be, they're not going to give you bags of money unless you are fully committed to that. So that is a
It sounds
really
like
neat topic.
like angel investors, like crowdfunding, things like that too.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's all of those pieces, and this is definitely just like scratch the surface of where you can go. But I think it's an interesting one to at least put out there, because this is going to be more of a. I see it more of a like, here's some things you should consider. Here's some things you can look at. How do you approach it? But I don't think we're going to be able to get too much in the details. So that's really cool. What But what you mentioned, the situation, um, gave me an idea. Would be like I'm just making this crap up as I go. I don't know if it exists, but sort of like a pitch party is how do you get customers to talk to you in a way that allows you to maybe make them a pitch. Now, there's always the one-on-one elevator conversation kind of thing or elevator pitch, but there's also the like, can you set stuff up? And what I'm thinking would be things like one of the things that is recommended to consulting companies is that you have like, for example, like a podcast or a blog where you talk to potential customers and walk through like what their problem is. Like some people it's like free consultation or stuff like that. Some of it is where you say, okay, well, we're going to have something. It's just like, what's his name? Dave
Evan?
Ramsey. Like,
Oh,
he's got a radio show and he talks to people about like money and financial problems and getting out of debt. But that's also the product that he sells is, is procedures and books and all this stuff to get out of debt. So it's the same kind of thing as having a content channel that allows people to see you working. And actually for developers, it's even where you could have like, there are developers out there, they record themselves writing code. And that would be something you see, oh, I can see how this person thinks. I can see how they're solving this problem. But it's basically like how to find ways, we'll call it like, different ways to spend time, connecting with customers, things like that. I mean, these are a little bit, it's a little meta, but
that might be a good follow-up to the first one because
that's what I'm thinking. So that being said, because we've never had a bad episode ever, we'll start with I'm just calling. I've got like notes as I don't know what to call. We'll figure out. We'll come up with a better way to describe it. Basically, I've got the notes that are how big is like okay, if your company's not, it's probably more like launching a company versus a side hustle. So, and as always, we will improv our way through it and see how it goes. And hopefully we will come to an ending that makes sense. Now, I'll have to figure out challenges as we go through this. This will be a fun one.
actually the challenges could be related to the funding.
It could be. It may just be do research. Okay, everybody listening at home, don't tell the audio people. Don't spoil it. All right, we're going in our famous 3, a 2, 1. Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season of building better businesses, but we are actually the Building Better Developers podcast, the Developreneur podcast. I am Rob Broadhead, one of the founders of Developreneur, also a founder of RB Consulting, where we are what they call a boutique consulting firm. We help a customer by sitting there with them, understand their problems, like a counseling session. Basically, we're hanging out, understanding the business, understanding the situation, understanding your customers, and then taking our decades of knowledge of technology and helping you find a way to take what you already have and what is out there to craft a recipe for success for your business so that your technology investment, whether it's through simplification, automation, integration, innovation, however we can do that, even just building elevation, just building out your company, find a way to make that a worthwhile investment and make sure you get a really good ROI on that. Good thing, bad thing. Oh boy, this has been a week full of bad things and good things. So bad thing, we had the storms come through and I had a night where the sirens started at 2 a.m. and they didn't stop until about 6 or 6:30 a.m. That was not a fun night. And I was fuzzy for the next day and then some. I'm still reeling from that a little bit. Good thing. There are moments, we were talking about this before the show. There are moments in life that are watershed moments, essentially, or something like that, where you're just like night and day differences. And I have shared a little bit that I've been going through downsizing and all that kinds of stuff. Not myself physically. Nope. I have not lost any weight, but I'm talking the crap, the stuff in my life. So I have a lot less things right now, but that is a very good thing. I may even someday do some blogs or write a book on simplifying because it really does take you to a different plane of existence. Somebody who is also on a different plane of existence on a regular basis is Michael, but he's going to come down to our plane of existence and introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Meloche. I'm one of the co-founders of Developer Building Better Developers. I'm also the founder of a company called Envision QA, where we help companies, big, small, clinicians, doctors. We come in and we help you go through your technology, go through the software that you're using to run your business. We help you. We, like Rob, we go through the trenches with you. We help you understand what your business is and how the software is supposed to work with it. And then we help you put together a plan to either upgrade your current systems, build something new, or if you have something custom made, maybe we can come in and we can help you make changes to that software to be more efficient with your current processes. Good and bad, a similar situation to Rob, except my situation with the storms is never ending. It started Wednesday with heavy winds, trees getting knocked over, storms all night Wednesday, storms again last night, storms again Thursday night, Friday night, and it looks like we're getting it all the way into the weekend. So between heavy winds, it's the rain at this point that we're more worried about because we've had so much flooding. But thankfully, we're on a hill. The downside is the hill is starting to wash away. So that's my bad. Good side of it, our grass has never been greener. All the lightning we have had, our grass is almost like that neon green. It almost looks like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it is hysterical. I walk out one day and it's like, wow, we got grass. Next day, it's like, okay, the grass is like an inch taller and it's greener. And then the next day, it's like, oh, where are all these flowery weeds? It's like, okay, now I need to mow, and it's not going to stop raining. And it's going to get to the point that the mower is going to have to be mowed on the highest setting. And I just have to pray that there's no rivets in the yard that I'm going to get stuck in from all this rain.
With all that water, you might watch out for shark fins as well. It like, yeah, that is the beauty of at least in my experience, Bermuda. I did that years ago, had the same kind of thing. I threw it down on a partial of a yard. We had a ton of rain and then a ton of heat. And it was literally one of those moments where you could go outside and you felt like you could hear the grass growing. And you could tell like where every little seed had gone because it was a gorgeous green while the rest of it was sort of like a blah kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I know where the seed landed. So that is a sidetrack. And now we're going to get back to the real thing, which is today we're going to talk about actually something that we in the pre-show and our pre-gaming it. I don't know that we've ever actually spent time on this. I think we did a little bit. I think it's a little bit referred to in the book, maybe in some cases like that, but really is an area we haven't touched on. And for lack of a better term, this is instead of focusing on a side hustle, we're going to focus a little bit. We're going to talk about building a business because there is a very big difference. Now, you can progress from a side hustle to a business. And I think this does apply in this case because it's when we'll say, turn the corner and say, I'm going to make this a business. It's essentially, for lack of a better term, when you decide your side hustle is going to become your day job. Now, what we want to talk about is scope, because this is something that I think you're going to run into more often. Instead of personal, you creating a business, you will run into it with your customers on a regular basis. At least I do. I've talked to several customers about starting a business. They come to me with an idea and they say, hey, here's an idea. I want to do this thing. And usually there is when they talk to me, it's usually like an MVP or dipping a toe in or something like that. They're like, we don't have anything. We've got some ideas. So we sit down and we talk through them, and how can we turn that into a product, a service, a company? What does that look like? And a lot of it comes down to there's definitely a scope aspect to that, just like there is to anything else, but even with the business, because it's things like, okay, do you want to, or do you have funding to go hire 10 people and have a small company? Or do you have funding that you can go hire 100 people and have a very big company? Or do you have funding that you can't even hire yourself? It's like there's a lot of difference in what you can accomplish with that. And that's Some of that goes to the vision. Now, your vision may be something very simple. It may be something like there's a widget that you're going to put on a shoe that you're going to be able to sell people. You can drop ship it. It doesn't really need much other than a website. So there may be something like that, but it could be something that is, an enterprise application that's going to have to require, maybe years of development, and it's going to require documentation. It's going to require tech support of some point, and training and sales and marketing and all those kinds of things that you can't do it yourself. If you can, give me a call, because I would love to like pick your brain for a couple of things here and there. But usually one person isn't going to do it. Even if you can, if you had the skills, you're not going to be able to scale to that level. And this comes from something that Michael had run into, where people were basically pitching ideas. And sometimes the ideas were great, they're awesome, but it's not feasible in their current environment. So those are some things that I want to throw out there, because we haven't really talked about the idea of like funding options. We've usually talked about bootstrapping, because that is easiest, because the only person, okay, there's two people you have to convince probably. And Michael's laughing because one of them is yourself. But before you convince yourself, you probably need to convince your spouse and make sure that they are on board. And, maybe others, if you have children, stuff like that, your family, because they are on board as well. And if they're not, you're going to struggle. Bootstrapping thus is easier because you also know what the budget is, because you know what you can afford to bootstrap, or you're in it all along and it's really just you making the decisions. Do I spend the money or do I not? Things like that. Once you start bringing in, now the next step would be bring in a partner. So you can bring somebody in that's going to share that burden. And it could be multiple partners. It could be like an LLC and you have 3 or 4 partners, something like that. So these are people that are invested directly with you. They are, and maybe they're just a financial silent partner, but usually they're going to have some level of interaction as well and helping you out, maybe like the idea of a board or something like that. But then the next thing is, there are things like you can do loans. You can get business loans through, you name it, through banks, but even PayPal now. Trust me, if you ever even breathe the idea of, I'm sorry, this is probably already going to blow up your feed for a while, but if you even breathe the idea of business loan to anything related to PayPal, you will get emails and advertisements until the cows come home. But there are banks, there are sites, and there are different places you can go that they're really focused on business loans. And the small business organization out of, if you're in the U.S., there's things like that you can go to some of your local area business groups. There are going to be some that will help you out. Those are some places you can look. Now, there's also the idea of venture capitalists and things like that, where it's basically you're going to get some money, but they're going to have some sort of ownership. They will be, I guess, in a sense, a silent partner, but usually they're not going to be a silent partner. They may even provide you with some people and some things like that, because if they're going to give you a lot of money, they're going to put some people in place to help you, to ensure that you succeed. In any case, they're going to have some level of ownership. So when it succeeds, they're going to make money off of that. There are angel investors that usually are more likely going to be individuals, although there are groups there as well. They tend to have a little bit different approach to it. They tend to be a little more, and it varies from one to the next, but they tend to be a little less maybe hands off. They tend to be a little more hands off, but they also are more likely to be a true believer, where they feel like, okay, I'm going to do this, and they're not going to, maybe not take as much, maybe they will. Your experience may vary on all of those. And then, like I said, once you get into like venture capitalists and larger funding rounds and things like that, those may be required. And before I pass it off, I just want to say, like, okay, I've talked about the funding, but what I want to talk about is size that has to go with this. Is think through what your business idea is, because this is definitely a part of it. Is like, is it something that you can do? Is it something that's very simple and you can start small and you can be effective as a business? Or is it something that you really are not going to be effective until you get to a certain point? for example, there are certain things like there's going to be certain lines of businesses and things like that where you're going to have to, maybe you have to spend a lot of time investing on developing software or developing infrastructure or marketing and sales. There are so many facets that go into an organization that you need to think through it, which means your first thing is you should have a business plan, which means, and we've talked about in the different areas in different ways, but basically it means in a short note, you have gone out and done some opposition research that you have an understanding of that market. You have an understanding of what you're going to charge and what it's going to cost. So what is your revenue going to be per sale or per month or something like that? And so now you have crunched the numbers and you get to take those numbers, and you're going to have to do that, whether it's a bank loan or anything else. Hopefully, even if it's your mom and dad giving you a loan, you should be giving them something that says, this shows that I've spent the time. And now we're talking black and white numbers. We're talking, I need, $5 million to give me 12 months because that's what it's going to take me to get there. And I'm going to start seeing payments in, 18 months out, I'll start being able to return on investment. So once you have that business plan, that is going to be, I think, the key indicator for you is, can I do this on my own, or do I need to look at other funding options? And so I think that set the table, hopefully enough for Michael to go wherever he wants with this. So what are your thoughts and where do you want to go with this?
So you kind of covered the funding options really well, and I like that you touched on the business plan. I'll circle back around to the business plan for a minute because really, before you can even go to some of these funding investors, a lot of them are going to require a business plan or some type of research document that shows that you understand the target audience, whoever it is that you're going after for this particular product. The other thing is you have to have a clear understanding of what it is that you are going to deliver. Who is your customer? What value is your product going to deliver to your customer? So you got to kind of branch out that business plan and actually really think through and flush out what your business is. What is your product going to be? Now, I liked kind of the round table discussion. Rob mentioned, if you get business partners, investors, but sometimes before you even go after the funding options, it's very wise to, while you're doing the business plan, go out and try to do a little more market research, either find potential customers, talk to them, figure out what it is that their business need is that your product will fill, or whatever their, if it's a home person, what is the need that your customer has that you need to fulfill. And with that, then you go through and you figure out, okay, what's it going to take to build the product? What's it going to take to produce the product? And then market and sell the product. Now, a lot of us, especially those of us going from side hustle to business, leave out a lot of the times, how much do I need to get paid? So you figure out the cost for the product, but you have not actually included, you've calculated the material cost. You have not actually calculated the time investment into the product yet. And so this is a good point to kind of watch for, because if that price point of your product, just to manufacture the product, is already at the limit of what your customer is willing to pay, you're already in trouble. Because one of two things can happen. You could come in price low but make no money, so you're going to go out of business fairly quickly because you can't pay the overhead. Or you're going to come in at price too high and your customers aren't going to buy your product and you're going to lose the race there. So one of the things to do as you're looking to grow your idea into a business is look at your day job, if you have a day job, or look at something along those lines of what the product is. If it's software, do a like Indeed search for software developers in, say, like junior, mid, senior. Figure out what the hourly cost is in your area for those type of people. Or if it's manufacturing, go out and do some searches online for what it costs to pay people to do manufacturing. Now, as new startups go, sometimes you can get people buy-in if you give them like stock options or percentages in the company. There again, though, you need to carve that out of your bottom line. Are you still going to make a profit at the end of the day if you go through this process? Once you've kind of done all that, you have this full cost of your product. What's it going to cost to manufacture it, and what are the materials I need to put into this. This can apply to software as well, because we still need to buy computers, we still need to buy monitors, printers, devices, laptops, whatever. There is always a material cost to a business. The people cost is where it gets a little tricky, because yes, you're thinking, okay, I know how much I need to pay them, but the other thing you need to also then consider is what other things are going to hit me that are unseen. And these are going to be things like local taxes, income tax, Medicare tax, Social Security tax, hidden taxes that you have to still keep within your business and still pay your employees and still make sure that that money gets to the government so everyone's happy. Once you add that, that now gives you a better cost perspective for what you can pay your employees, what they'll actually get, what you can actually pay yourself, and what you can actually get. And then you can crunch numbers to say, okay, one person can do X amount of work. Is that enough to meet my deadline from the beginning of the project timeline to the end? If not, you need to start adding bodies, essentially time units, to fill those gaps to get from A to B. However, you don't necessarily need all those time units up front. So for instance, if this is software development, you may need to hire the project owners, the designers up front, your architects up front to get the system going. Then you can hire the developers once you have a little bit better idea where it is. So you can kind of stretch that out a little bit to the middle, and then maybe stretch it out for the testers a little bit at the end. And then maybe bring the sales guys in, like a sales guy in at the beginning, maybe one at the middle and one at the end. So you can split your time frame for when you need to put people in positions to get things accomplished. And this is the time to think through that, because that can affect your funding. Because if you only need to hire 3 people at the beginning, not the 10 you think you need by the end, you can go out and get a small bit of seed money to get started. Maybe you can get a grant or something that doesn't, cost you overhead. Even then, you could possibly get like a small business loan and have a small interest. So you get started. You can see if this really works. Get it off the ground. Give it that first 3 months of money. And while you're doing that, you can then go off and say, okay, we're actually building this. So now I have something to physically show some of the other investors. And now you actually can it's easier to essentially market yourself to get more funding for your business. So that's kind of where I think this goes through the process. The other thing I would say that we haven't touched on at all yet is really getting that seed money, getting that investment money. That doesn't end until you have a product going out the door month after month and you have recurring revenue. So you need to plan either to continuously go after money to keep your business going till you finally make bank, or you need to figure out where is the break point. Where do I basically cut my losses because this is not going to make it, or I'm going to need a huge infusion of money. And if you need the huge infusion of money, it's a little bit harder of a sale, not impossible, but that usually is the point of no return for most businesses. Some startups sell their companies to be gobbled up to basically break even, but those are just things you do need to consider when you go to be a business, not a side hustle. Thoughts on that, Rob?
You gave me like a whole season of ideas right there. Some of the things you brought out. So I think the first one is it sort of combined the amount of funding. You do need to think about when you do this, making sure that you go through and give yourself the runway to get it done. And if you can't, then you need to figure out what is it that you can get done with the runway you have. And by that, I mean, like if you have money to fund what you're doing and your plan for 12 months, then you need that amount of money. You know what it's going to cost you to run this thing for 12 months. Now, if it's going to take you 12 months to get done, I recommend that you ask for, 15 months worth of funding, or probably, 18 months worth of funding. You do
Say that
not.
usual 20% like we do for development times, and that always
I
tack on
would think. I would
20%.
think even more than that. I would say it's actually a little bit. I think once you get beyond about 6 months of a roadmap, I think actually just add 6 months to it. If you need 6 months, go for 12, because it's not. I don't see it as much as percentage as it is. There's going to be things that even if it goes sort of right, they're just going to take time. And that goes to what Michael said is that don't hey, be very, if you're going to do this, be very intentional about when you're going to bring the players in. Now, this will actually go, I'll share real just briefly where I didn't quite time it right, but erred on the side of not spending as much money as I would have. And Michael's laughing because he knows this story all too well. I needed for a while a project manager, but I needed enough work to keep a project manager busy. And there's a lot of things that went into that decision. And I saw a project that I was working on and said, this is perfect to bring a project manager in. However, I also was like, hey, I can bring them in a little later. I can get a couple of these things started. So the funding is where it needs to be as soon as I bring them in. And I'm basically a little bit cutting. It's a little bit risk management. It's a little bit of like a lot of other stuff. Part of it was me just like realizing it was going to take work for me to hand this off. And I wasn't in a place to be able to do it, which was a timing issue for me. I should have prepared beforehand and did not. But had I reversed it and I had seen that, oh, I need a project manager and got the project manager before I had a project to manage, while yes, I could probably have done some stuff with them, it would have been not the most effective use of that time and that money at the time. So you're going to have to roll the dice a little bit on these, but there are areas like project management. You should probably have a project going. Development, you should probably have code to be written. Similar situation is the team got built, the development team probably got built out a little sooner than it needed to be. It made the first sprint or two a little more rough, I think, than they could have been had we adjusted that. But those are some things to think about is the timing. So make sure you've got enough runway so you are not freaking out, because the problem is if your runway is 12 months and your product gets done in 12 months, then as you get into that 11th and 12th month, you are going to be freaking out because you're going to be worried, are we going to hit it? Even if you hit it, you're going to be freaking out, are we going to hit it? And you're adding stress that, let's face it, we don't need more stress in our life. And if somebody says, I would have given you 12 months of funding, but I'm not going to give you 15 or 18 months of funding for the same thing, and maybe it's a little bit, it's a little more money on their part, but, maybe they asked for a little higher percentage or something like that, then they probably wouldn't have given it to you in the first place because they're basically then trying to, lowball you or however you want to look at it, but they're basically trying to get you to roll back scope to hit their investment as opposed to accepting what your proposal is. And that's like the last thing I'm going to throw into this one, and then we'll go into challenges because we could go too long on this, is put your business plan together, review it, and own it. If you do have an option to say, like maybe you, as part of your plan, you have option A, B, and C and say, well, we can do this, or we can do this, or we can do that, because we can do a MVP or a version 1, or we can get funded version 2, or we can get funded to version 3. Stick to your guns. And it probably is going to be, if you give them 3 options, they're probably going to be the shortest, best, low risk for them. And that's okay, but that's just make sure that MVP is something that solves it's a valuable problem that gets solved for your customers. And then it is within a reasonable amount of time. And then it also allows you to grow to, version 2 or whatever phase 2 is that we will call that. Your challenge for this one is look at your funding, look at your business. And this is, even if it's a side hustle, is this again, and we have made challenges like this before, but it's because they're very important. Look at what your income is and your outgoing for that. Because Michael, touched on it. It's like, if you're losing money per sale, then success is going to kill you because you're going to have all of these sales and you're going to lose all of that money. So look for hidden costs. Look for things like, hey, I have to buy an extra hard drive every 6 months because I'm having to store some extra stuff, or I've got an account on some cloud thing that I need, or I've got hosting somewhere that I'm paying for. All of these little things that work into it, because it's easy for us to ignore them or absorb them somewhere else. And when things grow, we get bit by it because we were blind. It's sort of a blind spot for us. So take a look at that. And I think as part of that, the the A plus student challenge is to write a business plan for that thing that you have moving forward if you haven't. If you have a business plan, review it. And how's that working out for you? Is there like, is it something that you like, you nailed it, or do you maybe need to make some adjustments and, maybe adjust how you approach things? If you don't need the A plus, then just like put together like a one pager. Just sit down and spend a little time about like, what do you spend? What do you make? How is this going to grow and what's that's going to look like? And do you need to, hire other people? Do you need to bring in part-time workers? What, is there something that you're going to need to do to grow that company? As always, would love to hear your feedback at info@developreneur.com. I think like you don't have to give us ideas, but I think just seeing the numbers and things like that would be really interesting. It'd be fun for us to share without anonymously, of course. But also you can reach us on X at Developreneur. You can reach us on our Facebook page. There's a Developreneur Facebook page. Of course, developreneur.com should be your go-to site for all sorts of technology, blogs and articles and content like this, because that's one of the places we live on a regular basis as well. Also, you can check out YouTube. Go out there. We have the Developreneur channel. We've got this and the last couple of seasons worth of episodes, not to mention lots and lots of training and stuff like that we've done over the years. And of course, I mean, we're on our way marching toward 1,000 episodes. Now it's going to be a little while before we get there, but we are just cruising along as far as podcast episodes. So we can go way, way back. And, if you try to go back to like season 1 and you can't find it, let us know and we will go, find the digital archive, wherever it is that we can get you that. That being said, we will wrap this one up. So go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Whew. Bonus while I grab something to drink.
So it's interesting within that challenge, as you're going through this process, the whole point of launching the company, building the business is understanding your customer, understanding the problem you're trying to solve. Be careful. It's not a bad thing to be ambitious, but it is potentially could be a bad thing as far as funding and getting things started. So for instance, if you want to try to centralize all the tax rules in the US into a single website with a single API that people could hit and basically become the new tax option for all tax software, that could be very demanding. There are a lot of tax codes, a lot of things out there. Now, if you wanted to do something scale down just a little bit smaller to begin with, maybe do something like, hey, let me start with all the state taxes for like the state of Tennessee. Let me build a site for that. So you start with one, you build the premise, you build the idea out, then you can make sure that it is solvable, meaning that you have business, you have people that want this, and that it's successful. You work out the kinks, and then from there, you can scale up as big as you want. You can do state by state, you can then get into federal government. There are many ways to skin that cat. But the problem is make sure that you don't start so big that you are trying to appease so many people at once, you're not going to identify your prime customer. An interesting example of that is Path of Exile 2 is in beta, and they did early access. You could pay to get into it, and their success kind of counteracted their business plan. They thought early access was going to give us some feedback, help us, vet the systems. Within a week, they realized that they have essentially pre-launched the game. The game is now live. So all their ideas for tweaking, they had to completely pivot. That is both a good thing and a bad thing, but that's one of those cases where you might want to get it in front of your customers first, maybe in small chunks. But if you go big, but just be warned that you may have too many inputs as to where you should go, and you're going to struggle with that customer feedback. You're going to have a lot of haters, a lot of lovers, or a lot in the middle. So be careful with that, but keep that in mind. Maybe start small and then expand, but start out with the big model and see how you can peel it back and kind of maybe do like stage 1, stage 2, or phase 1, phase 2. And then you have a roadmap. So not only that, you can now, hey, my business plan, look, I've got a 10-year model. Now, Most businesses will be like, let's see you make money the first year. But that just gives you an idea of where and how you can grow these business plans or your ideas to launch that business.
Uh, you make me laugh because you brought up this is something we have talked about so many times. And actually, what I was going to do was going to say, hey, one of the best ways to get money is to have something concrete in front of the whoever you're pitching the investment to, because they're going to want to see, is this more than just smoke and mirrors? And so it is not uncommon for people to be in a situation where they basically need an MVP in order to get the funding that they want to really move forward. And so the MVP is more about, while it is about something valuable to a customer, it is almost more about being important and useful to the investor, which is you're serving a little bit of a different master in that case. The challenge with this is exactly what Michael said, is that you end up in a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, but it's also one where I don't know how to continue that analogy, but it's like where the eggs look too tasty or something like that, because you can build an MVP, you can put it out in front of somebody, and it is good enough that they say, well, it's there. Why do we, instead of us investing $10 million, we can invest $20, right? And that's where, so if you get to that, you have to be ready to defend what is that next step. It does go back to a business plan. It goes back to saying, yes, this is where we're at. This shows you that we have solved this problem. And it's actually it is a leverage tool for you, because if you go in looking for investors and you can say, we have solved this problem, we have a solution, but this is where we want to go, and we need you to join us on this fun journey with your bags of money, signing some checks so that we can get to where we want to go. Because we don't see this as the end point. We see this as just barely the beginning. So be careful what you run into, and keep an eye on that, because it may be a situation where you start this saying, okay, this is my plan. I'm going to build an MVP. I'm going to do all of this, and this is how I'm going to progress. And the MVP is received warmly enough that those other plans get to change, because you're like, I can start selling this right now. People love this. We can bring money in. So we don't have to go to investors. We can now actually bootstrap it. So those are some things to think about while you're crafting that email to us. Of course, just if you've missed it somewhere along the way, info@developandor.com. We would love to hear from you and where we're going. Where we are going right now is to take a break until the next episode. We will be back. We will talk about that. I think we already know what it is, so it'll be a brief one, and then we'll dive right into the next podcast. But guys, go out there and have yourself a great day, and we will see you here back on this channel next time.